Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Hillsborough Township Planning Board meeting of May 12th, 2022. Please join me in a salute to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be advised this meeting has been duly advertised according to Section 5 of the Open Publics Meeting Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, otherwise known as the Sunshine Law. Notice of the 2022 annual meeting schedule has been provided to the officially designated newspapers. The Township Clerk posted on the Township website and available here at the Hillsborough Township Municipal Complex. In addition, application documents have been made available on the Township Civic Clerk website, and complete application files are available in the Planning and Zoning Department for inspection in accordance with the public meeting notice. That may have a roll call of planning board members and also of board and township professionals.
Mr. Wagner?
Here.
Mr. Beason?
Here.
Mr. Scobell?
Here.
Mr. Senator Ramita?
Here.
Mr. Hestag?
Here.
Mr. Ciccarelli?
Here.
Committeeman Delport?
Here.
Mayor LaPani?
Here.
Vice Chair Julian?
Here.
Chair Sarachi?
Here.
Mr. Maskey? Here. Mr. Bernstein?
Here.
Mr. DeSessa? Here. Pass. I'm here.
Excellent. Okay. So first up, we have consideration of meeting minutes of May 5th, 2022, last week's minutes. Well done, David. I have a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Any comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Beason?
Yes.
Mr. Scobell?
Yes.
Mr. Hestag?
Yes.
Mr. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Committeeman Delport?
Yes.
Mayor LaPani?
Yes.
Vice Chair Julian?
Yes.
Chair Sarachi?
Yes. Do not have any resolutions for tonight. We do have one item for planning board business, discussion of the meeting start time. I know Mr. Wagner had reached out, looking to see if it might be possible to start the meetings at 7 p.m. Because we've had some long sessions and not to keep them having to move into what I would call overtime on some of those evenings. So I know the township professionals have already been polled. I think they're good with the start time. So just going to open it up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, had asked if we could move the start time of the planning board till 7 o'clock. We've made other adjustments for some of the other meetings here in the township, specifically Health Department, Recreation Department, moving them up earlier in the evening. So I wanted to put that forth to see if we had consensus with that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can we move the stop time back to 10 o'clock then, from 10:30 to 10? If we're gonna get here a half hour early?
Works for me.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm open for that. And then,
Let's call it 10 o'clock.
so that would be, we would end at 10, last testimony at 9:30.
Is the idea to give us more time or the same time or to start earlier? What's the purpose behind it?
It was really just to start earlier. I mean, to be honest with you, to get home and sit around honestly, waiting to get here for a meeting at 7:30 when, I'm just watching television. I'd like to start early, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't, as far as the end time and stuff, I don't think that necessarily needs to be changed. I'm more concerned about the start time.
We did that with Environmental Commission years ago. It does that, it kind of gets you to the meeting earlier than just hanging out. But, I mean, sometimes when you're here till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, that gets pretty late too. So,
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind pushing it, going from 7 to 10. Anybody else? I don't know how anybody else feels.
Anyone else?
I don't mean to be a stick in the mud, but 7 o'clock is hard for some of us. Yeah, I can't get here at 7 o'clock, sorry.
I'll go along with the majority.
Yeah. Anyone else? Ken, I know you pulled your mic down.
Oh, yeah, personally, 7 would be okay. And I would say move the end time up a half hour too. You always have the flexibility to extend it if you wanted to, if the change was made.
Yeah, and I agree with the 7 to 10 as well.
Counselor?
Once a month?
7 to 10 is fine. Obviously, the problem you're going to have, Mr. Chairman, is you're going to have to amend the bylaws as well as just simply changing the time. I would also suggest, for what it's worth, that we talk about doing it after the recess, the summer recess, and start, because I know, and David and I have talked about it, we do have people who have noticed meetings for 7:30, and obviously, if you've noticed,
Right.
you can't have the meeting, it's started at 7.
That's fine.
David, do you have a feel for those notices, how
I think
how far we're going in?
Eric's suggestion is well taken. I think if the board did go that way, it would make sense to start it in September, because the June notices are already out.
Okay.
We'll have some Julys, but then we're off in August, so
Oh, that's true.
gives us time to bylaws, et cetera, and advertise properly.
Okay. So would we, can we just do a simple resolution, or do we need to, does David need
We'll have to
to?
take a look at the bylaws and
bylaws.
see what we need to do to change them, and then bring it all to the board at one time,
Okay,
at some point in the future.
all right. So please do that, and then we'll take this up next time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, with that, we do not have any ordinances for consideration. So next up is business from the floor for matters that are not on this evening's agenda. So if there's anyone that just wants to address the board on any topic, feel free to do so. And please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name's Ken Baker. I live at 452 Farm Road. I had a real quick question. There's a rather large construction taking place on Roycefield Road, and I was just wondering if the board can comment on what that facility is going to be used for.
Yeah, we'd have to know the location.
The facility is located across from, what's that? There's only one large building being built on Roycefield Road. It's pretty big.
Is that the Cavco? They're building they're building their barn to put their equipment in?
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I believe it was I'm trying to recall now because I think this goes back, but I think it's a application for a construction company to build a building to put their equipment in.
It doesn't look like there's any room for a large truck to fit in there. Any
I
of
think
it.
you can contact my office tomorrow and give us the location. We'll look into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Rich Garman, Winding Way. At the Harvard Way meeting a couple of weeks ago, there was mention of an assessment being done on Royce Brook tributary, an environmental assessment. Can you guys elaborate on that, where it stands?
We haven't had a complete engineering review, and it's still under process.
Okay.
Anyone else like to comment on items on this evening's agenda? Okay, seeing none. We are now moving to this evening's application, Homestead Road LLC, with a file number of 21-PB-25-MS/MSPV. Time of decision is May 31st of this year, block 200.10, lots 32 and 33. Commonly known as 203 Homestead Road and 189 Homestead Road. Application seeking preliminary and final major subdivision approval, preliminary and final major site plan approval, bulk variances and waivers to consolidate the two lots and then subdivide into two reconfigured lots and demolish all existing structures to construct two warehouse/office buildings with associated stormwater, parking, and site improvements on property in the Transitional Economic Development District. And I know that the Environmental Commission had their review on March 28th of this year. And let's see what else. And this was rescheduled from last week with notice.
Mr. Chairman, before we start, can I just go over some of the particulars for folks who aren't familiar with the process?
Sure.
So
Good evening, everybody. First of all, it's highly unlikely that this will be decided tonight, so if you don't get your chance tonight, there will definitely be 2, maybe 3 more hearings. We'll see how that goes. The way the process works, the applicant will present testimony from engineers, architects, planners, et cetera. After each witness, the chairman will ask if anybody has any questions specific to that testimony. So you'll all get a shot at it then. When the applicant is done presenting their case, which as I said won't be tonight, there'll be another opportunity for folks to get up and make any general comment they want. So it doesn't have to be specific to that testimony that was provided. So just wanted everybody to know that that's how it works. It's highly unlikely. I think it's fair to say nothing will be decided tonight. And we will, at the end of this meeting, tag when that next meeting would be. So, okay.
Okay, no, thank you. And also, there will be no new testimony taking place after 10 p.m. And we will wrap up at 10:30 because I'm not anticipating any short extensions going to get us through this evening. So, yeah. And also, I know I'm going to let Counselor back of the room.
Signs got to come down. Yeah, folks, this is a quasi judicial hearing. This is not a township committee meeting, with all due respect to the mayor and the township committeeman. The sign saying "Say no to Amazon" needs to come down. This group is ostensibly acting as if they were in a judicial capacity. So.
Matter if we hold it, why is that a problem?
Mr. Brooks, you're an attorney. You ran for township committee. You know exactly. This is quasi judiciary where this is not a political forum. And you will have your say to say what's on that sign at the end of this hearing. So put it down out of sight.
Or outside of the.
Out of room's fine. Put it outside.
Okay. Okay. Counselor, the floor is yours.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Michael Ogrodnik. I'm an attorney at Savo, Shaw, Corsini, Gillespie, Ogrodnik, and Fisher in Somerville. I'm here tonight with my applicant, Homestead Road LLC. As indicated by your chairman, this is a preliminary and final site plan and minor subdivision approval to demolish the existing buildings on the site and to construct 2 warehouse buildings consisting of 368,995 square feet and 168,304 square feet. Additional improvements, of course, lighting, stormwater management, landscaping, utilities. As indicated, this site is located in the Transitional Economic Development Zone. The current site consists of 2 parcels identified as Lot 32 and Lot 33 in Block 200.10. The site is located north of Homestead Road and comprises approximately 88.45 acres. The site contains 5 existing buildings near the east side of the property, with a majority of the remaining area consisting of vacant and undeveloped land. Utilities are proposed for this project to be all underground. By way of the area, the property is bordered on the north and south by agricultural properties, on the west by Route 206 and the railroad, CSX Railroad. Lot 32, which is 68 acres, is vacant and formerly housed a hog farm. Lot 33 is 20.38 acres and contains various agricultural and commercial buildings. For purposes of the subdivision, the applicant is proposing to move the existing lot line separating lots 32 and 33, resulting in lot 32, which is 68.06 acres, down to 39.34 acres, and lot 33, which is 20.3 acres, up to 49.10 acres. For purposes of the major site plan, on the western lot, which is lot 32, the applicant is proposing to construct the 168,304 square foot warehouse at the rear of the property with ancillary office space, parking, and loading areas. The warehouse would have 2 access points on Homestead Road. Lot 33 is proposing to construct a 368,995 square foot warehouse on the front side of the property with internal office space, parking on the side area, loading operations to the rear of the building. That structure would also have 2 access points on Homestead. As noted in the planning report, in the TECO zone, warehousing, shipping, and receiving are permitted principal uses in the zone. Fiscal impact statement estimates the proposed development would yield a net positive impact to Hillsborough Township for municipal services and public school education. Hillsborough Township could anticipate an initial annual net surplus of $164,506 for municipal services, while the Hillsborough Public School District grades K through 12 would see an initial net surplus in the approximate net amount of $950,000, totaling a tax rateable of approximately $1.14 million for the township. The area and bulk standards are enumerated in the TECO requirements. They comply for nearly every TECD standard, including minimum lot area, where 5 acres are required and the lots are 39 and 49 acres. Lot width, 200 feet is required. We have over 1,000 feet and over 2,000 feet. Minimum lot depth, 250 feet. We're at 1,573 feet for lot 32 and 997 feet for lot 33. For side yard, in the TECO bulk requirements, side yard of 20 feet, we're at 488 feet to the west, or to the east, 191 feet to the west, and for proposed lot 33, 219 feet to the east and 230 feet to the west. Minimum side yards adjacent to residential zone dwellings, 150 foot is the standard. We're at, for lot 32, 840 feet, and for lot 33, 219 feet to the east and 230 feet to the west. Minimum rear yard, 75 feet. We're at, for lot 32, 150 feet in excess thereof, and for lot 33, 375 feet. Minimum rear yard, 150 feet is the standard. We're at 378 feet. Impervious coverage, 60 foot is the standard, and we're at 23.1 and 32.7%. Building height, compliant with the zoning. Buffers to non-residential, compliant. Buffers to residential, compliant. For parking, 220 spaces are required. I believe we're at 384. And after a thorough review of the variances and the zoning table, we believe this application will necessitate only 2 C bulk variances. One, under Parking Design Standards 188-107-2F, which requires that curb cuts be a maximum of 24 feet. We're proposing 30 feet, so an extra 6 feet on the curb cuts, again, to accommodate the industrial operations. There's also two potential variants related to pedestrian circulation under 188-107-2F, which are supplemental regulations in the TECO district. Under F1A2 requires that the primary entrance of each building shall accommodate pedestrian access from the streets as well as parking lots. Given the location of the buildings off of Homestead Road, our professionals will testify that connecting the sidewalks, especially to Homestead, doesn't make a lot of sense. Under section F3E, where over 50 parking spaces are provided, the requirement indicates that there be pedestrian pathways identified with smaller scale pavement treatment, scoring pavers oriented toward the principal building. Mr. Ford will address improvements to accommodate pedestrian access to the building, although a technical variance may still be required. Mr. Maskey's review memorandum also indicates a potential at least compliance for EV spaces. We believe that we'll be able to comply with that and any other questions raised in the professional planning memorandum. As for waivers, we're asking for 2 directional signs. The code only limits the size to 2 square feet. We're asking for 9.3 square feet for those 2 signs. Again, for safety and circulation to support the operations. There's also a waiver for a second monument sign at the entrance, given the length of the frontage along Homestead. a waiver for crossing the underground pipe in the stream corridor. With me tonight, I have Michael Ford. He's our professional civil engineer from Van Cleef Engineering Associates. We have our Larry Valenza. He's our architect. We have Gary Dean. He's our traffic engineer, and our planner is Christine Nazaro Cafone. We also have Glenn Stock and Eric Grief on behalf of the applicant available to answer any questions. With respect, this is a building that's being constructed on spec. There's no tenants. There's no Amazon. So that's important to emphasize that this is a project that does not have an end user, does not have a tenant. In compliance with the municipal land law of the state of New Jersey, notice has been served and affidavits of publication and certified mailings to abutting property owners have been submitted to the board. And unless there are any legal questions, I would ask to swear in Mr. Ford or all of our witnesses.
We'll start with Mr. Ford.
Swearing testimony you give tonight is going to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Record of your state, spell your name.
Yes, Michael Ford, Ford.
I'll just ask, anything
Yes.
changed since last Thursday in your?
No,
Or
Okay.
the Thursday before that, or Thursday before.
no, licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey, and I've appeared before this board on numerous occasions, including last Thursday. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. First is a matter of illustrations and exhibits. The exhibit that we have up first, we can mark as A1. It's the existing conditions plan that was part of the application with an aerial image showing the existing conditions. I'd like to go over now what Mr. Ogrodnik referenced in his introduction with regards to orienting the board and the public with regards to the application.
We'll label this A1.
All right. As was stated, it's over.
Just for the purpose of the record, Mr. Ford, the date on the document is?
Zoom in. Zoom in out. Right. So last revised March 2nd, 2022. It's an existing conditions, existing features exhibit.
Thank you.
All right. So as was described, it's in the transitional economic development zone of the township. At the bottom of the page, I'm highlighting with the cursor is Homestead Road. There's just over 2,000 square linear feet of frontage along Homestead Road. That's the south or bottom of the page. To the west, or on the left side of the page, is the recently completed Hillsborough 206 bypass. And then at the upper left corner is the railroad. That would be our borders on the west. Agricultural field to the north. White Meadow Drive and residential community to the northeast, as well as to our east. And then bordering the property, which I'm tracing now, is a tributary to the Royce Brook. There are other tributaries or streams traversing the site. You can see them highlighting them now. Along those tributaries are existing sanitary sewer trunk lines. That is a major Hillsborough Municipal Utilities Authority trunk line for sewer collection, traversing this tributary as well as coming from Homestead Road down this tributary and then connecting with the main tributary trunk line and continuing on off the property to the north. So the property does have public sewer, and the public sewer mains are actually on the site. As you see with the aerial image, just immediately adjacent to the bypass is lot 32. That is part of the two lots that are make up the application. Lot 33 is the easterly lot. Those two lots would be combined and then re-subdivided to create two newly configured lots. So the 88 acres will be reconfigured. Other site existing conditions are what Mr. Ogrodnik referred to as the old pig farm, I believe. The westerly parcel is in agricultural use. There are a number of areas of disturbance on the parcel, so you can see that it's maintained either as agricultural or fields or disturbed. Historic pasture for the pigs. And along our frontage is one out parcel, a small residential lot, and you can see some disturbance and structures, not residential structures, but other site improvements, all of which would be removed as part of this application. While I'm at this location, one of the other significant elements of the existing conditions is a Texas Eastern Regional gas pipeline easement that traverses the site from the southwest corner over to the northeast corner of the site. And then moving over to the east portion of the site is lot 33. That's an existing residential dwelling and existing commercial operation. And that's close to this easterly portion of the site. With regards to other public utilities, there is not existing water main in front of the site. Now, just to the east on Willow Road is, and it's on the south side of Willow Road, is the old Nichols complex, which actually formerly housed the Elizabethtown Water Company. So the water main is just to the east of the site. That would be extended down Homestead Road to service the project. Other orientation, Homestead Road to the east would be an intersection with Willow Road, and to the west would be Route 206. And if I go up to the key map now, what I'm highlighting is the project site of 88 acres, the 206 bypass, the existing rail line, and then just to the west of the existing rail line is the existing Hillsborough Business Park or industrial complex with Stryker Lane and Raider Boulevard access points to that existing facility. Other site constraints we have done, there's been a wetland delineation done on the site. An application for a freshwater wetland LOI is pending at NJDEP or the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. There also was a full boundary and topographic survey of the site, and there has been an analysis and assessment of the floodplains versus with regards to FEMA mapping. And what you see in blue highlighted here are the outer boundaries of the township's stream corridor, which I'm highlighting now. And you'll see even in the existing conditions, and there are some areas of existing improvements within that stream corridor which would be removed. Those areas would be restored, and the proposed project, but for the areas where there are proposed crossings of the streams for access driveways or connections to existing utilities such as the sewer trunk line along the stream, there would be no impacts or intrusions into that stream corridor. The site, other zoning, I didn't mention this earlier, is to the south on the opposite side of Willow Road is the AG zone and an existing agricultural use. There also is a portion of the TEC zone, which I'm highlighting now, to our southwest, as well as to our northwest. And what you see in the extreme right corner of the property or the exhibit is a portion of some site improvements that actually were started as part of a site plan approval for a vitamin facility that the applicants discontinued construction, and now that site is vacant. Now, to go to the second exhibit, the proposed conditions. This would be A2. It's the site exhibit, last revised April 28th, 2022. Of the 88 acres, less than half of it, or only 40 acres, would be disturbed. The highlighted green areas, that is these areas I'm highlighting now, that is along the stream corridor. The upland areas on the other side of the stream, adjacent to the residential community on White Meadow, would be undisturbed. And the stream corridors, as I described earlier, would be undisturbed. The Texas Eastern pipeline would be undisturbed with the exception of the proposed access driveways to one of the two proposed buildings. What's being proposed is removal of all the existing site improvements. That is all of there are some I'll say vacant shells of buses and other debris on the hog farm. And then with regards to lot 33, the existing residential dwelling would be raised, as well as that entire commercial operation. Septic 911 in that facility would be removed. What is proposed are two buildings with 4 driveway accesses, 2 each to Willow Road. Starting on the west side of the property, closest to the bypass, there's a driveway access to Willow Road for what I'll refer to as Building 2. I'm sorry, Homestead, excuse me. Building 2 with parking along the east side of the building and loading along the west side adjacent to the rail line. There is a second driveway being proposed to that site. That second driveway, what I'll call the easterly driveway to Building 2, follows the route of the existing agricultural access that is used to farm or was part of the operation of the pig farm. And certainly that driveway would have to be improved and reconstructed and enhanced for the proposed facility. The initial project application included a third building. That is, there was initially, as part of the application, a third building proposed where I'm highlighting now, just to the east of the second driveway to Building 2. After review comments and discussion with the staff and the applicant, that building has been removed from the site. And that's no longer part of the application. With regards to building number 1, or the easterly building, again, 2 access driveways, one on the east and west side of the building, setback from Homestead Road to provide a landscape buffer and to preserve some extensive existing evergreen trees that are in front of that property. Behind that would be parking along the front of building 1 with access driveways connecting to both the east and west driveways accessing the site. And at the rear of that building would be the loading docks and 1 row of trailer parking. And that's another element that was changed after the initial submittal of the application. At the rear of building 1, part of the initial submittal of the application was a 2nd row of approximately 80 trailer parking spaces in this location. That's been removed and it's been reduced to just a single row. What you see on this application too, or this exhibit with regards to stormwater management, is to the rear of the site. We're proposing 3 stormwater management facilities or basins. For building 1, there's 1 infiltration or bioretention basin at the rear of that site that would collect stormwater from all of the improvements, and the discharge point from that facility would be to the Royce Brook down slope or downstream of our residential neighbors to the northeast. And in comparison to, and I'd like to go back to Exhibit 1, there's the existing commercial operation now on lot 33 has no existing stormwater management facilities. It's been in existence for some years, and that impervious coverage runs overland flow now. Some of it discharging at this point I'm highlighting now up close to Homestead Road toward the Royce Brook. One of the enhancements of the proposed application and part of the stormwater management facility would be to eliminate that portion of those existing improvements that's within the stream corridor, and also eliminate that discharge, collect all the stormwater from both the roof and the motor vehicle surfaces around building 1, have that discharge into the basin at the rear of building 1, where it's mitigated for and the peak flows are reduced, and it's discharged at a location downstream of where there's existing runoff from the existing condition. The public sewer connection for building 1 is out the back of the property or building to that trunk line that runs along the Royce Brook. And then the public water connections would be from the existing, or excuse me, the main extension from New Jersey American Water along Homestead Road. That water main extension would continue down Homestead Road to service building 2, both of those driveways, and the water main would extend into the rear of the property, servicing building 2. And with regards to public sewer connection for building 2, as I stated earlier, there's an existing trunk line of sewer collection, regional sewer collection, that actually comes from Hillsborough Business Park or Industrial Park, under the railroad, under the bypass, along this tributary to the Royce Brook. Oh, excuse me. And the sewer service for building 2 would connect into that trunk line. So there's no public sewer, a need for public sewer extensions out to Homestead Road. For building 2, with regards to stormwater, there are 2 basins proposed. 1 basin in the front of the building or on the south side of the building that would treat and collect stormwater runoff from the 2 access driveways, as well as the roof. And then there's a 2nd basin, that is a bioretention basin, providing both water quality and quantity control. And then with regards to other stormwater mitigation, there's a 2nd basin proposed, which is an infiltration basin adjacent to the parking area. What you'll see on this exhibit is that the stream corridors which I'm highlighting now, that is both the stream corridor from Homestead joining in with the stream corridor that flows from under the Route 206 bypass in easterly direction to the Royce Brook, as well as this other stream corridor that bisects the property and the Royce Brook itself. Those stream corridors are, the disturbance in those stream corridors is minimized to just what I highlighted earlier, which is the utility connections and the driveway access to Building 2. The existing intrusions into that stream corridor will be removed, and the area beyond the existing wooded areas to be preserved along that stream corridor will be enhanced with additional landscaping. That is landscaping along the access driveway, the easterly access driveway to Building 1, as well as at the rear of the property. Along the front of the properties I referred to earlier, there's extensive landscaping that'll be provided to supplement the existing vegetation that'll be maintained, including the mature evergreen row, and then along the westerly side of the westerly access driveway to Building 1, there'll be additional landscaping, and that's also going to be part and parcel to the preservation of that stream corridor. And then the existing disturbances within the stream corridor, and that would include even the agricultural uses. Let me go back again. You'll see in this exhibit, as I described earlier, the stream corridor limit is that blue line. You'll see the existing agricultural uses intrude into that stream corridor in many areas. All of those intrusions would be removed, including even the land disturbance for the stream corridor. The township code requires that those areas be preserved in conservation easement, and then the natural landscape or natural succession of vegetation would be permitted in those areas. So over time, even these areas that are not designated for plantings today would be permitted to return to natural forest. With regards to the relief that Mr. Ogrodnik referenced, that is the driveway width, and it should be highlighted that he went over in detail all of the bulk standards, that is lot area, lot width, building setbacks to our neighbors, where we're not just at the minimum required setback, that is where the minimum required setback to a residential neighborhood is required to be 150 feet. We're at over 200 feet in this area, and it's over 800 feet over here. With regards to impervious coverage, where 60% is permitted, in total over the site, we're less than half that, or less than 30% total impervious coverage. And Building 1 lot site is at 32.7% impervious coverage, and Building 2 site is at 23.1% impervious coverage. So you can see that the proposed improvements are well under the max allowable impervious coverage that would otherwise be permitted in this site. And that would include even developing areas that are beyond the critical areas, such as the areas I'm highlighting now, which are the northeast portion of the site, albeit on the other side of the Royce Brook, but it would be area that would be potentially developed, would not be developed. With regards to tree mitigation or tree impacts, first I'll go back to the existing condition exhibit again. You can see that the areas of trees are predominantly along the stream corridors that aren't disturbed by part of the existing condition agricultural use or residential or commercial operation. And there are some isolated tree rows that separate the existing agricultural areas and clumps of trees within the agricultural areas where 60% of the existing wood line or wooded areas are permitted to be disturbed. Less than 30% of the existing wooded areas will be disturbed as part of this application. And with regards to tree mitigation, all of the tree mitigation, that is the required compensation. And there's a mathematical formula within the ordinance that requires tree mitigation at different ratios depending on the size of the tree impacted, are going to be mitigated for with on-site plantings. That is, if 2 trees are to be planted for every 1 tree of a certain size, and you know that's the minimum. So of the trees to be disturbed, the minimum net result would be that if a 2-to-1 planting ratio. So all that'll be planted on site. And with regards to the township's option for economic hardship, which you've seen on other applications, that is not being requested or applied in this case. Loading and parking. We have at building number 2, 96 parking spaces and 29 and loading at the rear. And then at building number 1, we have 188 parking spaces across the front and loading at the rear. There was a request in one of the professionals' review memorandums to consider not constructing, and perhaps what we would suggest is if the board would so desire, banking parking being proposed in excess of the minimum required. On many other applications, I'm used to having an applicant request relief from the required number of parking spaces. In this case, we're meeting the required number of parking spaces. We feel that the proposed number of parking spaces is suitable for the intended use, and it does exceed the minimum requirement. And to the extent that there is a desire to perhaps reduce the total impervious coverage or the initial construction, we would keep the plan as is. That is fully designed and prepared to install parking spaces as proposed, which meets and actually exceeds the minimum required parking. But if there was a desire to bank the difference between the required minimum and what's being proposed, the applicant would consider that. We'd like to have the option, of course, to build it if there is the need arises, or there's perhaps even in other applications, I've had situations where it's banked, and if parking needs warrant, and that is even the zoning officer observes conditions that warrant that build out of parking, they could require it to be built. But we're not asking for relief in that case. We're actually responding to a comment by a staff member to consider that, and we would. With regards to the relief for the driveway access, the max width of the access driveways at Homestead Road in the TEC zone is 24 feet. We're proposing 30 feet. As part of the development of the application, we consulted with your professionals, including Chris Winiger, the fire official, and given the proposed use and always cognizant of public health, safety, and welfare, we're proposing the 30-foot width to provide for better flexibility for emergency access, firefighting access, and that would be for all of the driveways. And what I'd like to highlight and point to the board too is that what you often see is your parking standard, that is for vehicle parking, standard vehicles requires a 30-foot wide access aisle and 10 by 20 spaces. And often we request relief or a waiver from that. We're not doing that in this case. And what is, I'll say, somewhat ironic about that is that the ordinance code now requires a 30-foot access aisle down the vehicle access lane, but restricts the main access to 24 feet. What we'd like to make them all 30 feet. So there would be clear 30-foot access around the entire building number 1. And with regards to building number 2, we're proposing the 30-foot access of both driveways, including a connector driveway along the south side of building 2, and then ample, wider access in the loading area. And then on the north end, a fire access lane. That is, I'll say, if you will, a green paver lane for access so that if an emergency vehicle needed to traverse around the entire building, they could. And we had received a review memorandum from Chris Winiger dated April 28th, 2022. There's no objections or comments with regards to those access points and our provisions for emergency vehicle access. They're asking us to amend our fire truck turning exhibit to reflect a recent, change in the largest fire truck that the township has, and we'll do that. And there are a number of other bullet points, and the applicant would comply with each and every one of those bullet points, including designated no parking signs or no parking areas, so that the 30-foot access aisles with the ample parking would be prohibited for use for vehicle parking and wouldn't be advantageous for that by the adequate parking provided in the vehicle parking areas. Outside agencies, we've made application to the Somerset Union Soil Conservation District. We've received comments from them and are preparing responses. They are detailed comments with regards to the stability of the discharge points for soil erosion and sediment control at our basins. As the board knows, any application for construction includes a number of outside agency approvals, one of those being the Somerset Union Soil Conservation District that monitors the project during construction to preclude and prevent soil erosion and runoff from bare soil areas. Obviously, when you disturb the soil and you don't revegetate it right away during construction, there's a potential for sediment to laden stormwater to run off site. So there would be sediment barriers placed at the limits of disturbance. And the basins would be used as temporary sediment basins to collect stormwater and treat the stormwater for that sediment loading during construction. And throughout construction, the staff members of the Somerset Union Soil Conservation District would visit the site and also enforce restrictions such as tracking mud out onto the public road. And what I'd like to refer to now is we also received a memorandum from the Hillsborough Environmental Commission. And I know we discussed this at the meeting. There was a suggestion to provide for some sampling of the existing stream water, and I believe that the request was with regards to the main stream tributary, that is the Royce Brook, to sample the stream for existing sediment loading throughout construction. And with regards to the Environmental Commission's comments, that's one comment that we would suggest that the mechanisms already in place by the Somerset Union Soil Conservation District offer high protections. That is in addition to the Township Engineering Department's inspections throughout construction. And that request is not necessary by virtue of that outside agency already governing and monitoring that entire issue throughout construction. With regards to other outside agencies, we've made application to Somerset County Planning Board. This is not a county road, nor does it impact the county drainage facility, and that application is pending. Typically, the county would offer comments if it were a county road, but in this case, since it's a municipal road, I would think that that is under township jurisdiction. With regards to NJDEP, that is the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, already referred to the pending freshwater wetland letter of interpretation application. That is to verify the limits of wetlands delineated by the wetland consultant. That application is pending. As part of this application, the neighbors within 200 feet would have been noticed for this public hearing. And also with regards to the NJDEP application, that requires that certified notice to neighbors within 200 feet as well as the township. And that complete application is on file at the township clerk's office. Other NJDEP applications. The project would likely not require a treatment works approval for sewer extension, since I've already described that the sewers are actually traversing the site. There will be a flood hazard area permit required for the 2 driveway crossings of this stream corridor, as well as the discharge points from the detention basin and the connection to the existing sewer main along the stream. The details of the bridge crossings for the driveways are being finalized, and that application will be submitted shortly. That would also include a verification of the flood hazard area, which is documented by FEMA, the Flooded Emergency Management Act. So that application to NJDP would also include review of the stormwater management aspects of the application. Other outside agencies, we have also submitted an application to the Delaware Raritan Canal Commission. We received a review memorandum from that agency in February. It included detailed responses to our stormwater management facility design, which they indicated comply with the regulations of the Delaware Raritan Canal Commission, including the NJDEP NJAC 7:8, that is the New Jersey Stormwater Management Regulations. They did ask for additional mapping and verification of the stream corridor. That would include the flood hazard area, and that will be provided to the DNR Canal Commission as part of our submittal to the NJDP for the flood hazard area. Other outside agencies, we've been in communication with Texas Eastern Pipeline representative, that's NBARC. They were part of the initial review of that project, providing information regarding the existing Texas Eastern pipelines. There's 4 pipelines that traverse the site. They're within an existing easement, but for the 2 driveway crossings to building 2, there's no other disturbances within that existing pipeline, and that includes also the limitations within the township's ordinance, where there's restrictions on disturbances not only within the underground pipeline easement, but within 75 feet of that easement. New Jersey American Water. We've had communication with New Jersey American Water. We've provided our plans to them for review. We've communicated with them, and there's been hydrant flow tests to document the existing capacities of the existing mains. And prior to construction, there would be a need for the applicant to enter into a developer's agreement with the New Jersey American Water Company for the extension of the public water main down Homestead, and then the on-site water line extensions would be done by the developer, owned privately by him and that, or them, and that would be under review and approval as part of a construction permit through the township's construction department, as any other plumbing permit, and also reviewed by the township engineering department. Should I take a breath?
I think Michael appreciates that.
Have a drink.
Hey, hold on, Mike. Good.
Thank you. The other aspects of the stormwater management, I think I focused on water quantity, that is the basins which mitigate for stormwater quantity. There's also requirements as part of the stormwater management facilities to address water quality, that is the runoff treatment as well as recharge. We're proposing porous pavement within the paved areas as a best management practice for water quality. There's also mechanical treatment devices, which are treatment mechanisms, that is green infrastructure in advance of catch basins where the motor vehicle surfaces would not flow over a porous pavement area, as well as the water quality provided by the basins themselves. With regards to pedestrian access, we described earlier in our introduction, technical relief that would be required in the TEC zone for a parking area over 100 spaces. There is a requirement that the parking area be broken up in a sense that it would help to deter high-speed vehicle traverses. In this case, since it's not a destination point in that it's not a retail facility, the parking in the front of Building 1, which is the only area where we have over 100 spaces, is to be utilized by employees and visitors to the site, but it's not a high turnover, and we'll have a traffic consultant or traffic engineer describe that use in more detail. So what we provided is some landscape islands along the front of the building where parking spaces otherwise might be, and they would be planted with trees to help break up, if you will, this parking access aisle. But we're, I think, technically required, we would be technically required to have a relief for that situation. That is not having the area broken up into even smaller areas. And then with regards to pedestrian access, there's a requirement in the TEC zone to have pedestrian access ways from the parking area to the building highlighted with scored pavement or different pavement markings. In this case, where we have a single narrow row of parking as opposed to like a shopping center where you have multiple rows of parking where people would be parking and walking through other rows of parking. That's not the case here. So every parking space along the front of the building has direct connection to a walkway along the entire front of the building. And then the only other pedestrian movement would be from those parking spaces on the other side of that single row of parking to the building. So there's really not an opportunity or an offer, an area that really lends itself to specific scored designated access for pedestrian for these employees that would be parking in this area. because certainly if someone parks their car in a space, they'd walk directly to the sidewalk rather than to some other area and then cross the access aisle. The last element in the zone, which is a technical relief required, and that is there is a requirement that there be pedestrian access with a walkway from the building to the road. There's no existing sidewalks on Homestead Road, nor are we aware of a plan for that. There is, if the board would desire an opportunity to provide sidewalk connection from the sidewalk that runs along the entire front of Building 1, and I'm going to go to Building 2 in a minute, but Building 1, and have a short sidewalk to connect the front of the building to Homestead Road along our easterly and westerly driveways, but it didn't seem warranted or prudent in this case, so we're requesting that relief. And that would be same in part and parcel to, there's an identical situation with the vehicle parking along the front of Building 2 or the east side of Building 2 with a sidewalk across the entire front of the building. This is less than 100 spaces, so there's no requirement to break up that parking. But with regards to pedestrian access, there doesn't seem to be a practical or prudent opportunity to provide scored pavement for pedestrian crossing just from that single row of other parking on the other side of the access aisle. And then with regards to pedestrian access to Homestead Road, there could be a sidewalk added along the easterly driveway access out to Homestead Road, but again, without other further connections for pedestrian access, nor having a destination that really is a pedestrian destination. We haven't proposed it, and we're requesting that relief. I can conclude with the landscaping. We've described already the abundance of landscaping along the front of Building 1, as well as the preservation of the existing mature trees in that area, the preservation of the existing trees along the stream corridor, and the enhancements of those areas for landscaping. With regards to grading, the site sits up higher than our neighbors. There's a substantial difference in gradient from a high point of elevation 100 by Building 1, or the finished floor of Building 1, to more than 20 feet lower, our area of land to the east of us. And then with regards to Building 2, there's a substantial green area that'll be preserved. And then there's further enhancements of landscaping in those areas immediately adjacent to the proposed improvements. And then to the extent that the existing disturbed areas as part of the prior agricultural operation are left to naturally succeed to forest, that landscaping will just continue to be enhanced. Being asked to give you the total tree count of numbers that we're planning, and I don't know that off the top of my head. I would have to look at a plan. But as I said earlier, we're providing all the mitigation on site. There's no request for relief with regards to landscaping. In the review memorandums, there's a request to demonstrate compliance. We feel that the proposed plan does comply. There's a requirement for a 100-foot buffer to our neighbors. We're substantially more than that, and the building itself is more than 200 feet from the property line, and that's our nearest residential neighbors. The landscaping aspects, that is the required tree mitigation, in addition to the tree plantings within the parking areas and the required buffering of parking areas, which also includes other plantings such as shrubs and shrubs that would be permitted to grow at higher, more than just 3 feet, but 5 to 6 feet high are being proposed. And to the extent that the township professionals, that is your planner or your engineer, feel that there's areas that could be further buffered or landscaped to enhance and ensure the buffers to our residential neighbors, our landscape architect would be glad to work with your professionals to do so. Just as housekeeping with regards to refuge, that is trash removal and recycling, that would be by private waste hauler. And we provided at the rear of the building trash enclosures, and as is commonly practiced with such facilities, there likely would be a disposal area for recycling, say of cardboard or so on, occupying one of the loading spaces and directly connected to the building, so there wouldn't be even a need to take the refuge out of the building and into a detached refuge area. We've discussed signage. There are relief waivers regarding signage. We had shown on the plan 2 monument signs at Building 2. That does require relief. But if, and because of the building being set back so far from the road, there really needs to be signage. It's likely to be difficult and not apparently visible. And then there's also relief requested with regards to directional signs, but they would be within in the site and likely not even visible from Homestead Road or the public road. But there is a limitation on the size of those signs, and the architect has provided, as part of the architectural plans, a signage package. But there is limited signage proposed. A new element that you're going to hear more of now is last year the governor signed an act requiring provisions for electronic vehicle charging stations on virtually all land development projects, that is multifamily residential standards or developments above a certain number, as well as commercial applications such as this. And that is a certain percentage of the total number of parking spaces would have to have provisions for either immediate or future electronic or vehicle stations, charging stations, or EV charging stations, and the applicant will comply with that requirement. I understand that there hasn't been an ordinance adopted in town yet with regards to that for specific commercial, perhaps a township ordinance for township properties. But we have on this plan already an EV charging station detail, as well as the language from the Governor's Act, which I understand applies to the entire state, even if a township doesn't have an ordinance. And again, the applicant will comply. Site lighting. The proposed site lighting, the typical with this type of facility, you would see site lighting mounted at perhaps 20 or 25, even 30-foot high mounting fixtures. For example, the Hillsborough High School parking lot along Animal Road has 30-foot high mounting fixtures. In this zone, the TEC zone, the max allowable height of the lighting fixtures is 15 feet. Our lighting plan complies with that height restriction. So we haven't sought, which would really be more practical in a situation like this, with mounting lights at a higher light standard. We've complied with the 15-foot mounting height. All the lighting on newer developments now is utilizing LED lighting for energy efficient, as well as shields for shielding glare or side lighting and focus and lighting on the area it's intended for, that is the paved area. Lighting areas can be designated with various zones, which can be controlled internally within the building. So there could be zones that could be designated for on or off at different hours, as well as the lighting for LED lights now can even be provided with ability to adjust the intensity of the light. I'm not sure if I missed any elements that the board would like to hear about.
Yeah, I think we'll go to 9. Midway point. You good? Okay. Drew, I'm going to let you go because you've got your memo. So let's try to get through as much as that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, yes, we did a review report on this application. It's dated May 6th, 2022, covering our comments. I'm in the microphone. Can you hear me? Is it on? Okay. Our report is dated May 6, 2022. We did a review of the application relative to the township ordinances. Most of the comments are technical in nature. The applicant has addressed a lot of the, has described the system of stormwater management. One area that we did bring up was Homestead Road and the width of that roadway. Currently, the plans do not show any kind of widening, and that road is relatively narrow, 22 to 26 feet. And with the amount of truck traffic, was our recommendation that that roadway be widened on the applicant's half of the road, on the applicant's side of the property. Currently, there is storm drainage there that is set further back, almost in anticipation of that road being widened at some point in time. So we are recommending that due to the size of this application and the volume being generated, that road be widened on that side. I don't think I have any other specific questions, just regarding stormwater management. They did provide a groundwater recharge spreadsheet, which shows they're complying with the groundwater recharge requirements in this application. I did not see a geotechnical study or report done, so I was just curious whether that was going to be done, is done, and whether there's any issues with geotechnical issues on the site.
Should I? With regards to geotechnical, there has been preliminary assessment for geotechnical in preparation for construction and analysis of the site suitability for the proposed buildings and improvements, and we can provide a copy of that to the board's engineer.
Okay. we had some traffic comments in our report, but we can save that for next. That's
Sure.
all.
Thank you.
Joe, can you just, in terms of the stormwater runoff and the calculations and the plan that has been put forth, can you just kind of give an idea of your review and comfort of same?
Yes, I mean, we reviewed the calculations, of course, in relative to the requirements of DEP requirements for reductions in quantity and water quality, and they meet all the requirements. So we have some technical comments, but for the most part, their basins are adequate volumes, outlet structures are controlling runoff in accordance with the regulations. So right now, everything appears to be in compliance with the stormwater management regulations, and of course, they do have to apply to DEP for some DEP permits, and DEP will also perform a detailed review of the stormwater management regulations under that application. So right now, I have no issues with the stormwater management.
Can I just maybe just highlight some aspects of our stormwater management to add on what the board engineers already stated, and that is with regards to stormwater management, there's a peak flow reduction requirements for the 210 and 100-year storm, where you're required to reduce your peak existing flows for those storms by a certain percentage of what the existing condition is. That's the state standard. For the 2-year storm, it's 50%. And for the 10-year storm, it's 75% less than the existing peak flow. And then for the 100-year storm, it's 80%. Those required reductions for this site, for the 2-year storm, we're required to reduce our peak runoff down to a flow of 13.5 CFS. Our actual stormwater management mitigation facilities reduce or provide for mitigation that discharges 5.2%. So it's actually half of what the standard is. So I think what I'd like to emphasize is we've endeavored not just to meet the standard or just be at, if we're allowed 13.5% CFS, we're at 13.42 CFS, we're at 5 CFS. If I could continue for the 2-year storm, the allowable discharge is for the 10-year storm is 43.6 CFS. We're proposing a discharge of 17.3, substantially less than what the allowable would be. And then for the 100-year storm, where the permitted discharge per the regulations would be 99.8 CFS, cubic feet per second, we're at 79.2 CFS. And those calculations are not taking into consideration elements that make them very conservative, and that is with land cover, you change your stormwater runoff. Obviously, more impervious coverage on a green area promotes or provides for greater runoff. The opposite is true for an existing agricultural field or disturbed land where there isn't woods, where that land is, the disturbance is eliminated or stopped, and the land is permitted to go back to forest. I described that as part of this application and what's being proposed, but what I'm reporting to the board is that the stormwater management analysis, the report that was provided and the numbers I just cited don't take credit for that added enhancement. So if you were to really crunch the numbers for the changes in land cover, that is certainly the land cover with the additional impervious is considered in the calculations, but the land cover changes that'll result from the application where you eliminate existing disturbances in stream corridors or agricultural areas and let them return to forest or natural land which would produce less runoff, that there's been no credit taken for that. And there has been no endeavor or change or request to change the hydrologic soil groups. We have C and D soils on site per the mapping. That's what the regulations or the current published documents show for the site. We've used that for our analysis.
Anyone from the board?
Yeah, hi, I have a question related to Mr. DeSessa's report regarding item number 10 on stormwater, which says that test pits will be performed prior to construction to determine the depth of groundwater and soil permeability. Is that addressed in the geotech report you just referenced, or is that, how will that be addressed?
Yes and yes. He's asked for the results of that testing, and to the extent there's any other testing that your engineer requires prior to construction, we will do that to his satisfaction.
Has that been done now, though?
Yeah, we've done testing already on site. The geotechnical report is available.
Okay.
And to the extent we need to do supplemental or additional testing, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to go over some significant items on the Environmental Commission report and a DNR report, but do it after the break.
Yeah, I know, so that's a long list.
It's a long list.
All right. I'm just going to throw one quick question, because I know it's going to come up at some point. Obviously, the application is predicated on the reconfiguration of the two lots, because as the lots are configured, we don't have conforming application at this point. And I'm going to ask Mr. Bernstein, just to clarify, because I know the ownership of the two lots are different ownerships. And, essentially what we're doing is combining the two and then subdividing. And I just want to get clarification because for that momentary time where it's actually one single lot, does the ownership need to be of the same entity?
Not necessarily. The question becomes who has the contract purchase ownership for it. The bigger question may be what comes first, the disengagement before we start talking about what then goes on the property.
Exactly.
So,
So anything here is hypothetical.
I think at some point the applicant has to put on the table exactly how they're planning on reconfiguring the lots for the purpose of this application, and probably seek board approval for doing same. And one of the things they have to prove is common ownership.
Do we have-
Whoever the common owner may be.
Do we have that established?
Not yet.
Okay.
The proposed lot line is right here that I'm highlighting. And the existing lot line is right here. And the preliminary and final major subdivision was part of the application. And one course of action might be that the applicant takes title to both of the lots and then perfects the subdivision by virtue of the final plat to create the two newly configured lots. But the application includes the subdivision as well.
And I think it's a minor subdivision, and it is common ownership, will be common ownership.
But it isn't today.
It's not today, no, it's separate owners.
Will it be by the end of this application?
No, I mean, it's a condition. The approvals are a condition of the contract purchase. So it would be a condition of compliance in the event the board grants the subdivision. It would be
So the subdivision would also be a condition on the proof that there was common ownership.
Have to be, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
All right, we'll break on that and leave that cliffhanger. So we will reconvene. We'll give it about 10 minutes, then after 9, we'll reconvene. We're going to get started. Okay, Cass, we're good? Okay, we're back from recess, reconvening. I think I know, yeah, I had thrown up my question, Mr. Bernstein, so we had some dialogue on that. So before I ask for a motion to open to public, any other comments, questions from the board? We got? Mr. Chairman?
No one.
Oh, that's right. That's why I forgot. We paused, Neil.
If Mr. Maskey wants to go.
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. Just want to clarify that discussion about the bank parking spaces. First of all, you'd reduce the spaces down to the minimum required, is that true?
Correct.
And those areas would not be paved, they would be left in some sort of vegetative state?
Correct.
All right.
Thanks.
Similarly, having to do with the trailer parking spaces, 62 spaces on lot 32 and 75 spaces on lot 33. The first question is that an accessory rental use, or is that directly related to the warehouse?
It's directly related. It's not going to be an independent secondary use.
And do you need that many spaces? Can that likewise be reduced in size and remove some of the pavement?
I believe it's a 1-to-1 ratio, which is what the industry prefers. So you can have one in the loading dock and one queued.
You did reduce the initial by half, so you were able to reduce the initial number. You can't reduce it any further than that?
Yeah, maybe that's a better question for Mr. Dean.
Okay. Two related items. Mr. Ford touched on them. Crossing the pipeline and crossing the stream corridor. And you need to demonstrate that it's the only reasonable way to provide access, that you have to cross both the pipeline and the stream corridor. So could you elaborate on a little more why you can't, for instance, shift building number 2 to the south side of the pipeline and the stream corridor, somewhat similarly placed to the office building that you took off the site plan?
Okay. Sure. I'm referring to A2. Let me get my hand. All right, in the front of the property, there's the Texas Eastern Pipeline easement, and this is in front of Building 2, that would prohibit construction there. So the building, there's no building envelope available. To the extent we're proposing the 2 driveways, the easterly driveway follows the existing driveway. There's an existing driveway that crosses the pipeline and the stream now, and there's actually a small bridge at essentially the same location that we're proposing the new driveway on the east portion of Building 2. And then with regards to the second driveway, that's both from a logistics standpoint to not force trucks to go where to try to minimize interaction between the vehicles and the trucks but also, I'll say more so for emergency services. If we had it limited to one driveway and there was some emergency situation where this easterly driveway was blocked, this second driveway would facilitate the flexibility for a second access. And the second driveway, as well as the first driveway, are located such that they're outside of the stream corridor of this other tributary that runs between the two of them. So that entire tributary stream corridor is preserved. It's really just the tributary that runs in an east-west direction from under the bypass that's disturbed just at the crossing.
Is it possible to have one of those driveways reserved just for emergency vehicles and then not pave it, do one of the alternative ground covers like you've done on several other projects?
Yeah, I would say that no, that doesn't seem really practical because it does serve the dual purpose of the splitting the access way, from the trucks and the public or the employee access for parking in the front. Okay.
I'm just going to refer to one of Mr. DeSessa's comments. On the general comments, number 8, the requirement that at least 40% of the roof area be structured to support solar panels. Are you ready to do that?
They will comply.
Okay. That's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Like I said before the break, I wanted to go over 2 reports. One is the Township of Hillsborough Environmental Commission. That report is from May 11th, 2022. It was received May 12th, 2022. So it's a 6-page report, a lot of information in there. What I wanted to do is go over some of the more significant items. On page 2 of the report, about halfway down, I'm talking about lot 33. I'm just going to read some of this verbatim. The responsible party is the current property owner with the buyer to take over. The project is going through an ISRA for waste management operations, septic tanks, and related services. 25 areas of concern have been identified by the LSRP on site, of which 16 have been preliminary designated as requiring no further investigation. Additional areas of concern require additional investigation. 1 soil sample conducted, which had metal exceedances looking at compliance. Averaging an ISRA preliminary assessment is currently underway. If not completed before the sale, remediation agreement will be signed and funded. A phase 1 environmental site assessment, ESA, was also prepared for the property. To date, the EC has not received a copy of the phase 1 ESA for review. I would recommend, before any resolution, that the Environmental Commission has an opportunity to review that ESA and make sure that we have the opportunity to do that. If you go down a little further, I think it's the 5th bullet point up from the top. Another item, the applicant's ecological resource inventory and impact assessment report dated December 10th, 2021, identified the tributary of the Royce Brook as freshwater 2 non-trout. However, it did not address the TMDL requirements. So that also needs to be addressed. Go over to page 3, which also talks about the ESA. The Environmental Commission did a site walk, but they did not have the ESA report. Therefore, when they were doing their site walk, they couldn't really complete this site walk without the review of the identified recognized environmental conditions, without that ESA report. So I would also recommend, once the Environmental Commission has that report, that they be able to conduct another site walk while they have that report so they can review the property as well. Same page, the EC had the following comments or recommendations. The O&M, the operating and maintenance stormwater manual should add tree replacements. About the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullets down, the applicant needs to provide the Hillsborough Stream Corridor Ordinance waiver justification and documentation for 2 proposed stream crossings. The stream corridor also includes all immediately adjacent lands with slopes greater than 10%. The plans need to reflect as such. About halfway down, middle of the page, we also recommended that the applicant go before the Hillsborough Township Historic Commission, as the property is located within the National Register of Historic Places, NRHP eligible, inch lines, linear, multi-state historic district, and also within the Hillsborough Pleasant View Historic District. NRHP identified, and 201 Homestead Road is designated as an NRHP identified individual resource. We also identified 189 Homestead Road, lot 33 is also listed as an NJDEP known contaminated site. So the Environmental Commission requests a copy of the Phase 1 ESA report for that as well. Talking about the stormwater, the operation, the O&M manual, the Felterra advice, the replacement of the trees and vegetation was not noted in the O&M manual, and there is concern with trees dying. About, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 bullets from the top, pre-development. Okay, that talks about the stormwater. Okay. The other report, I would like to also talk about some issues is the DNR Canal Commission report. That report was dated February 1st, 2022, received on February 1st, 2022. I was looking at page 3, third paragraph down, and it talks about 100-year floodplain associated with all the tributaries to the Royce Brook. The applicant has not provided existing and proposed conditions to that stream corridor, delineation maps or exhibits. Below that, the project appears to be proposing intrusions within the defined commission stream corridor area delineation. Therefore, the project is subject to a stream corridor impact review pursuant to the NJAC 7.45-9A. However, the commission staff will require additional information for the review of the stream corridor for the waiver request. Page 5 of the DNR report, which addresses the non-structural methods. It talks about, however, an NJDEP non-structural strategies point system, NSPS was not submitted for the project. Therefore, it's unclear if the project has proposed non-structural measures and that are adequate in accordance with NJAC 7.45, 8.4. At the bottom of the same page, page 5, additional information required by the DNR Commission. Tributaries to Royce Brook within the area and Associated Commission. Please submit separate existing conditions and proposed conditions. DNR Canal Commission Stream Corridor that clearly identifies the 100-foot buffers adjacent to the 100-year floodplain of the unmanned tributaries to Royce Brook. The source of the floodplain delineation should be identified and could be delineated by using any one of the 6 methods that are provided. And then after that also, another request from DNR, please provide specific details on proposed disturbances within the commission stream corridor to unnamed tributaries. So it seems like there's definitely some significant items that DNR Canal is also requesting.
Want me to, I'll go backwards.
Okay.
For this stream corridor, the plans do show now, and actually as part of the DNR Canal Commission submittal, the flood hazard area delineated by method 5, which is a conservative analysis of to establish the floodplains or flood hazard areas for a stream corridor. I think what happened is there's so many lines along the streams, wetlands, contours, township stream corridor, DNR stream corridor, flood hazard area. And I think it's a matter of more presentation in a clear manner so that they understand what's being presented. The stream corridor for the DNR Canal Commission and their claiming jurisdiction for intrusions into the stream corridor are basically for those same elements that the township stream corridor is being impacted. That is the 2 driveway crossings and those limited areas of intrusion for discharge from stormwater management basins and connections to the sanitary sewer easement. There's no request for a reduction in the stream corridor for the DNR Canal Commission and making it bigger somewhere else. We're respecting that 100-foot distance from the flood hazard area. And as I think I stated earlier, we've completed the detailed analysis for the 2 stream corridors for the driveways, the bridge structure designs, and are making application to DNR or NJDEP for the flood hazard area permits, and those same documents will be provided to the Delaware and Raritan Canal Commission. And as you know, any application at the DNR Canal Commission isn't granted final approval until they receive proof of both county and township approval. So we're not going to ever get to the finish line with the DNR Canal Commission until we address those 2 outside agencies. The method 6, he referenced methods 1 through 6. Method 6 of flood hazard area delineation in the state regs is a detailed analysis. That is a hydraulic and hydrologic study of the stream. That's required where the 2 driveway crossings are being placed in order to gain approval for those structures. So in that area, that we'll have the detailed analysis. All other areas, we're using that more conservative method 5. So certainly, we'll comply with each and every one of those comments and requirements of the DNR Canal Commission. And then with regards to the Environmental Commission comments regarding stormwater, that is the tree replacement, certainly add that to the O&M manual. And I don't think it was stated yet this evening, but the township actually already has in place an ordinance that requires any facility with an on-site stormwater management facility to provide first the O&M manual, the operation and maintenance manual, and the restrictions associated with the stormwater management system are recorded at the county clerk's office so that they don't get lost in translation from property owner to property owner. They're always evident by a title search. So they go just like with an easement. So anybody that did a title search for the property would see the O&M manual for the stormwater management and understand the obligations to properly maintain that system. Above that, the township has an ordinance that requires annual inspections of these facilities, and those reports get submitted to the township engineering department. The contamination, the ISRA, we did, when we appeared at the Environmental Commission, we did have with us the applicant's LSRP, and he described those issues, that is David Robinson, and those issues are not with the proposed application. Those issues are related to the existing operation on the easterly lot, lot 33. and they're to be addressed in accordance with NJDEP standards. It's not a township jurisdiction, but to the extent that reporting and documents need to be provided to the township, such as the Phase 1 report, the applicants agreed to do that. And with or without the application, those, as I understand it, those environmental issues with the existing property need to be addressed in accordance with DEP standards. And being proactive, the applicant is already, while they don't own the property, has engaged an LSRP to guide them in that regard.
I would just request that the Environmental Commission has an opportunity to review that.
Yeah, I think that the Environmental Commission, we agreed to provide it as a Dropbox because it probably has thousands of pages of documents. So it could be distributed amongst the board members.
So that'll be before the next hearing. We'll have that.
Yes, yes.
Thanks.
Any additional questions, comments from the dais?
So the lot for building one, I'm referring to the two roads, particularly the roads that are going over the wetlands and the pipeline, and you're requiring permits and permission to do so. If by chance those permits aren't granted, what does that do to your project?
We've certainly, just like with any outside agency, if we don't gain the approvals that we need, that doesn't address the condition that any board approval would include. So
I guess I'm saying, would you reduce the building to just one, or is it all or nothing? I guess what I'm asking.
no, I think that what I want to say is that as part of our due diligence, we've already engaged an environmental consultant. We've reviewed the NJDEP regs. We're proposing the crossings at locations where the impacts the existing wetlands are de minimis. For example, this crossing, the westerly crossing to access Building 2 is located at a location where it minimizes the impact of wetlands. So I fully expect that we will comply, and the proposal does comply with DEP requirements, and we'll gain that permit.
Mr. Chair, I just want to add a little background to that comment from the EC regarding the Historic Commission. We have forwarded this to the chairman of the Historic Commission to get his thoughts, but just for the board's background, the National Register of Historic Places, that's the Inch Lines Linear Multi-State Historic District, that's actually the Texas Eastern Pipeline. It's a National Register site from Texas to New Jersey. Just as a little background, it was built in 1942 to quickly get oil from Texas to the East Coast to ship overseas during World War II. We have come across this before. Generally, it's, as long as you're not disturbing it, there's no structures, and in some places there are above ground structures. So that's what that comes from. There was a house on that property, apparently, that was historic, but it was apparently demolished in 2003. So.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any more comments? Otherwise,
Motion to open the public.
you have something?
Yeah, I
I
had
see
a
both of
question.
you staring at me. So. No, not you.
Oh, me, yes,
Yeah.
I was going to ask the question about the, and you can go after me, John. The Environmental Commission. They're saying it's a known contaminated site. What is the area of contamination? And also in regards to, say, site remediation, taking care of any runoffs, remediation during the remediation, that sort of thing.
So that's with regards to the existing facility. So that would have to be addressed prior to the new construction. And actually, the new construction, I think, would promote and ensure that that action gets carried out properly. And that's all under the guise and direction of a LSRP. I'm not an LSRP, so I can't speak to address the details of it, but it's all done under their direction, and that's under DEP guidelines.
Okay.
Thanks. I have a question, again, related to something from Mr. DeSessa's report about widening of the road. And it talks about widening in front of, along the frontage. And there's the Pinter residence right in between. And I'm just curious as to if the plan that's going to be submitted by the applicant will address that. As well as, I guess my general question is what will happen to the rest of Homestead Road? Because you have to the west to Willow and then on the other side of the overpass. So there's more to Homestead Road than just the frontage that might be impacted by this.
The request, as I understand it, is for the widening of Homestead Road along the frontage, which is about 2,000 feet. And as you indicated, there's this out parcel in front of the Pinter lands, which would not be part of that request to the extent what happens in front of there. There hasn't been a decision by the applicant to do anything right now. It's, I think, really left to further discussion with our other professionals, including our traffic engineer, regarding the merits or the appropriateness of the widening from a physical standpoint. So the board understands the widening, as I understand it, is the request is 18 feet from center line on our side of the road. And as Mr. DeSessa indicated, our office has reviewed this. For the most part, along our frontage, the existing storm drainage catch basins, if somebody were to care to look and see what the road widening would go to, the existing catch basins along Homestead Road that collect stormwater are set back off the edge of road, the edge of pavement, the main travel lane. And that location of those catch basins is approximately where the 18 feet would come to. So it would basically be a straight line between those catch basins. But I'm going to defer to our traffic engineer to speak to it in more detail, and the request is limited to our frontage, not off-site.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I was thinking something similar as well. Like, because I heard you mentioning about the other driveways that were going to be 30 feet wide on the left building.
Correct.
So is that a one-way driveway, or will it one lane each direction?
One lane in each direction.
Right,
Correct.
so that 30 feet, I guess, so two trucks perhaps going in different directions could be comfortable driving that way. So then when you compare that, I heard that Homestead Road is 24 to 26 feet wide, I think. So to me, the whole length of Homestead Road would not comfortably fit two trucks going in both directions. So not just the frontage, but would the whole road be a risk?
I'll have our traffic engineer address, that part of his.
Right, okay.
But I would say, keep in mind that the 30 feet on site is also an emergency act, whereas along Homestead Road, you wouldn't be necessarily, the structures aren't there. We're trying to provide a 30-foot wide lane around the entire building to acquiesce to your fire chief marshal's desire to have more than ample space to stage for emergency purposes, which may not exist along Homestead Road, but I understand,
Right. And I'm
that
not sure
math
what-
is easy.
I'm not sure what's safe or what's not, but
Right.
we want to make sure the whole road is wide enough to comfortably say, traffic both ways. Especially if there's like drainage on the side of the road, like if one truck were to go off the road, like is there room to ride out, or is there like ditches along the side there?
Along our frontage, beyond the edge of, excuse me?
The whole road?
Well, okay.
But I know you probably can't speak to that, but I know. Thank you.
If I can just add to that, I think the applicant will have to work with them with a conceptual plan. I'm right in front of, okay. We'll have to work with the applicant to come up with a plan of the widening. The intent was not to leave that out parcel alone. It would go right across. That doesn't make sense to leave it out. There's certainly, typically, we request applicants to do road improvements widening along their frontages. In this in case, the road is about 22 to 26 feet wide. We'd have to look off-site to the rest of Homestead Road, but we can look at that with the applicant to see what makes sense and hear from the traffic engineer about that. But certainly along the road, most of the trucks from the traffic report, they're coming from 206. That's the route, and we can look at that further with them.
So with all the additional questions, I had one getting back and just reminding with the Environmental Commission report about the one property being the area of contamination, just because I've got a little flashback of a recent application. Was there any required monitoring of that property?
I don't know the answer to that.
David, is there a way for us to find that? Similar to a recent application where there was some known issues that there was required monitoring of any runoff or contamination leaving the property that had not been occurring. So I just wanted to know whether or not this is a similar situation since this has been
Yeah, that situation
identified.
was specific to that property owner.
Right.
This is something that should have been addressed by the LSRP in their evaluation in terms of whether or not any ongoing monitoring should have been taking place. So if the applicant wants to provide some information from the LSRP, they could answer that question much better.
And with the intent is if there should have been, then we're going to need to get some information. And if there has been, we would like to know those results.
Well, the LSRP has to meet state standards, as you know. The LSRP, although is a consultant to a property owner, they are in essence working on behalf of the state.
Right.
So if an LSRP missed something, they're the ones that are responsible to answer for that.
Right. Okay.
Is there an LSRP report?
I believe it was in the preliminary state, but we'll supply, when we get it, we'll supply it.
Can you ascertain what the status of it is and advise the board accordingly?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anyone looking at me up here, so I'm going to ask for a motion to open the public.
Already made it.
Oh, sorry.
Motion open.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Okay. So at this point, public is free to come up, state your name and address for the record, and to only ask the witness questions that are germane to the testimony he has given. So. What was that? Well, that's no new. We'll go to 10:30.
David Brooke.
Yeah, you just got to scream into it a bit.
Is it working? Yeah. Okay, fine. I'm sorry, David Brooke, 7 Winding Way.
I don't think it is, actually. It was on, did you turn it off?
Testing.
Yeah.
Like American Idol.
That's right.
All right, we'll try it a little bit more. Okay, so just a few quick questions. Who doesn't love trucks? Of course, it's a rhetorical question. The second lot 2, I don't know what the right name of that building is directly adjacent to the railroad. Has there been any consideration of building a railroad spur to bring goods in and take them out via railroad. And should I just go through these?
Yeah, I mean, just ask him, the questions and let him, and if he can answer, he'll answer.
Natural gas, I didn't hear anything. I must have missed it. How are you heating the building?
I would leave the utilities for the building to the architect, but natural gas would be provided from PSE&G.
But there is none.
Yeah, to the extent it needs to be extended to the site to service the site, PSE&G would do that. Yeah.
Okay. Railroad, or should I just keep going?
Railroad, no design or consideration. It's such a small portion of frontage along the railroad to get the spur. So, no.
Well, I would just ask the planning board to pursue that question a little bit more, simply because railroads move goods so much more efficiently than trucks. And since it's right there, the railroad might be willing to build a spur. Combining it. A lot more goods, maybe one rail car moves 3 or 4 trucks worth. Okay, the property to the northeast of this location is landlocked, basically, from what I can see, by the Royce Brook. Is the applicant interested or willing to deed restrict that property so that it can't be built upon?
Yeah, the question refers to this area. See what the cursor is?
Yes.
Yes, the applicant would consider that.
Okay. You mentioned the building is at 100-foot elevation and that it's 20 feet higher than, I'm going to say, the Winding Way area or adjacent property. With a 40-foot building, that means it's now, if I'm doing my math right, 60 feet taller than any adjacent property. And I guess my question is the lighting. You mentioned that the lighting is a height of 15 feet. Is that in the parking area or is that on the building?
Both.
So the lighting on the building is no higher than 15 feet?
Correct.
Okay. The question about widening Homestead, I guess, goes back to 2 things. One, the westerly exit, which is, I think, what you're calling it, for the traffic flow in. Can you tell me or anybody else the distance of sight to the railroad overpass to the west? Because my concern would be if trucks are coming out there and somebody's coming up over that horrible overpass, there's going to be an accident almost immediately, because a truck pulling out and traffic coming over that hill is a major issue.
Right. Yeah, we provided in the plans lines of sight, and with regards to the traffic safety considerations of intersections, we'll have a traffic engineer testifying regarding the application as well.
I spoke to the Raritan Valley Sewage Authority engineer. My understanding is that of the reconfigured Lot 2, not all of it is in the sewer use area. A quarter of it is not.
There's a small portion, when you say Lot 2, you're the westerly or left side, right? There's a
Correct.
small portion of the front of this lot where the Texas Eastern pipeline crosses that's not within the sewer service area, but we're not proposing anything that would require sewer in that area. The buildings are within the sewer service area.
If you were to build a building in the front, as was asked by the planner, would you be able to hook in?
Ironically, the public sewer is right in front of the property here. So it's right in front of where building 3 would have been placed. So we would have either requested an amendment to the wastewater management plan to extend the sewer service area for that little building, or provide an on-site septic system because it was such a small building. But now that's really not applicable anymore because that building's been eliminated from the project.
Just 1 or 2 more questions if I can. The roof drains go where?
Into the stormwater management facility.
Is there a reason why the one residential unit is not part of this development?
That's not under contract by the applicant, so it's not part of the application.
And should I presume that that property, once it's subdivided, is not being looked at by the LSRP, or does the LSRP look at the entire two combined parcels?
It's my understanding the LSRP looks at environmental issues as part of the real estate transaction. Just specifically what parts of the site, I don't know the answer.
So the Environmental Commission probably knows this better, but my understanding is the LSRP is only going to look at a property that has an SIC code that would require site remediation to be involved. And if that Pinter, I'll call it the Pinter property, is not part of it, I don't think the LSRP is going to look at it, which was the other question. Are you willing to have the LSRP look at that other property? Because there was all kinds of dumping out there. I personally witnessed the owner of the Pinter house there burning plastic and trash and other garbage. So they obviously weren't complying with any sort of environmental requirements. And I'd be concerned that that area is contaminated beyond it. And if the LSRP only looks at ISRA properties, he won't be looking there.
We don't own that land, so we can't and won't.
I'm saying
investigate
the adjacent part around the house, not the house itself. He was burning and destroying and burying things from what I could see outside of that area. The fire department responded, so there's reports of that also. The part you will own.
What I've said already, the testimony is any area that's disturbed now that's needs to be cleaned up, and like the buses that house the pigs will be removed. And then those areas will just be left in a natural state. So that would include the entire tract.
Let me ask it differently, and maybe the Environmental Commission wants to ask it. Is there a way that the applicant would be willing to do a site investigation of that other, I'll call it the pig farm? Because right now, I don't think the LSRP is going to look there. So I'll leave it as a question because I don't want to take any more. The last question I just wanted to ask is, would the applicant agree to not have tractor trailers go out to Willow Road and only go to 206?
We have Mr. Dean from Dolan and Dean who will testify with respect to traffic.
It's not traffic, it's trucks. I don't care about the traffic. I'm just asking, would the applicant agree to not allow the trucks to go to Willow? It's got nothing to do with the numbers or the flow. It just has to do with an agreement like any other.
It's not his
agreement.
testimony, David, so
Okay,
we'll get there, but it's a traffic issue, not an engineering issue.
okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just a little bit of clarification. It is standard practice for the board to require conservation easements on all environmentally sensitive lands and anything basically not being used for the development.
Good evening. Thank you. Maria Vallejo, 2 Valinor Road. I appreciate the time.
Can you spell your last
Sure.
name
V's and Victor, A-L-L-E, Jason John O,
and your address?
2 Valinor Road. Is it correct that the major site plan is conforming now contingent upon the subdivision approval?
Both applications were submitted simultaneously, so they're being considered by the board as in totality.
So let me ask you this. If the subdivision is not approved, would this site plan be conforming as it sits here today?
The subdivision is necessary in order to put the two lots or the two buildings on two separate lots. One alternative to address maybe the subdivision issue would be to just consolidate both lots, because the ordinance doesn't preclude multiple buildings on one lot.
But as you sit here today, as it's partitioned, if you put in the major site plan, the application would be considered conforming.
No, the existing property line would go right through this building, so
Okay.
that
And so I guess this is more of a threshold question. does this board have jurisdiction? Right now, in order for this to be conforming and to be before the planning board, the subdivision needs to be approved. I don't know if you want to bifurcate it. I don't know if you want to take a look at it and consider whether or not you want to separate it or send the application as it stands before zoning. I have other questions, but I think before we hear any more testimony related to the site plan, we have not heard any testimony related to the subdivision, and that's not been approved. So by basic, MLUL, it really should not be before the planning board at this point.
Well, actually, it could still be before the planning board, and one of the options available to the planning board is to deny the application because they haven't met the requirements to seek the subdivision in the first place. And understand that even if it went to the zoning board, it would probably end up back here at the planning board once the zoning board granted potentially any of the variance, because the variance really, the nonconformity of the application is more building 1 than it is building 2. Building 2 currently sits on a proposed lot that is well within, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. O'Brien, well within the confines of the issue. So the building in issue is the larger of the 2 buildings. But one of the arguments that has to be proved is why they need the subdivision.
And I understand that. I guess my question is, unless you can bifurcate the 2 buildings as part of the application stands as it is, as a whole. And right now, it's non-conforming unless the subdivision is approved. And I'm just, it's not.
What may end up happening, and we've done this before relatively recently, we may have to deal with the threshold question of whether or not the applicant is entitled to the subdivision. Because if the applicant isn't entitled to the subdivision, that application is non-conforming and can't be approved, can't be dealt with by this board.
And you're absolutely right. That's just my point, though. So should this board not hear whether or not the subdivision should be approved to determine whether or not the actual site plan approval belongs to this board or the zoning board? So my request is that either you bifurcate it or at least hear that testimony first, make a determination whether or not the subdivision is going to be approved. And if it is, you can proceed with your site plan approval. If it's not, site plan belongs before zoning. So it's just.
The current site plan.
The current, exactly. Yes, Mr. Lindsay, absolutely. So.
If I may, you're absolutely correct. This can't be built as the lot lines currently exist. Part A of this application, and it was submitted simultaneously, was that they would move the lot line to the west and create the 2 lots as you see them now. I agree they did not really cover the subdivision in any real, I'm not sure why they didn't, but that's really part 1. The zoning board, even if, well, you'd have a building straddling a lot line under potentially 2 different owners, so it wouldn't even make any sense in that case. So you're right. The zoning board wouldn't have jurisdiction. It is a permitted use. There are no D variances involved. It would be all C variances. But you're absolutely right. The subdivision really needs to come first because this doesn't exist. As you see it there, this does not exist today in terms of the geometry of the property. So it's fantasy right now until that subdivision line is moved and approved by this board.
So I guess that's the question to the board and you can choose to answer it.
Well,
I would request that you guys go ahead and listen to that first.
It's the obligation of the applicant to bring before the board the necessary testimony to prove the need for the subdivision. If Mr. Ogrodnik fails to produce that, it makes this board's life very easy. It's called no, because he failed to move it. So at the moment, the issue of how Mr. Ogrodnik wishes to put this issue before the board is his call. But at some point, it's going to have to be before this board, and it's going to have to be a board decision before the board makes any ultimate decision on the remainder of the application, even if it's ultimately done at some same meeting. So,
I'm sorry, go ahead. It's not unusual, and you've seen many applications like this where lot lines have to be changed in subdivisions as part, prior to the site plan. But yes, it is a step 1 that they haven't addressed yet in any great fashion, which they do need to do first, the subdivision. You can't build that until you have the subdivision.
And it was the issue. Turn that off. And that was the issue I kind of raised, going down that path before we took our break. But as I say, it's the applicant's dime on how they want to proceed with their, with their case. I mean, I'm not going to stop them. I'm going to, they want to continue and present it as in the order they wish to. That's up to them on to doing that. I'm not going to just all of a sudden stop and force them to change course or change gears at this point. But as Mr. Bernstein said, it will have to come up at some point, whether it's tonight, which I doubt, or, over the next couple of, hearings.
So, I mean, I have questions related to the engineer.
Oh, yeah.
If I just may
Please.
suggest that that might be addressed first before we go further with any other testimony, just to ensure that subdivision actually be approved. But, so you had testified at one point that there was complete tree mitigation at a ratio of 2-to-1, correct?
The township has a tree mitigation formula. The minimum for smaller trees is 2-to-1. As the tree you remove is bigger, the mitigation requires greater plantings, 4-to-1, so on.
And you met all the mitigation requirements?
Correct.
And I know that Mr. Julian, I believe, had mentioned the May 11th, 2022 Township Hillsborough Environmental Commission Memorandum, right? On page 2, the memo states that the project includes the removal of 161 trees. There's a requirement of 460 trees to be planted, but the applicant's planting only 305 trees. Is that correct?
No.
Has that changed?
Since the Environmental Commission, we've made revisions to the plans. At that time, we had proposed not to plant them on site, but make a contribution to the township tree fund. What we've done since then is made changes to the plan that reduced the amount of trees we're disturbing. I described earlier the trees along Homestead Road in front of Building 1 that are being preserved. The prior application had that building closer to Homestead Road, and those trees would have been disturbed. So the mitigation requirement reduced somewhat, and the on-site plantings were increased to meet that. So we're planting all the trees we're required to on-site.
So there's no need then for the additional monetary contribution?
Correct.
Okay. Those are all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nia T. Shah, 3 Deer Run, Hillsborough. My questions are about stormwater and then about the lighting and parking. So with regard to the stormwater management, have the plans been made based on historical stormfall, rainfall, or what's been happening the last 2 years, which is all these 100-year storms, 10-year storms happening every year?
There's a rainfall distribution that we use for our stormwater management analysis that's dictated to us by DEP. And that is what we've used.
So it's historical, not current.
Well, it's continually updated. Not too long ago, we used type 3 analysis for stormwater distribution. Now it's NOAA, which is presumably from historic rainfall data. So periodically, DEP makes that change to that database that all engineers use.
So then.
And the change has been increased.
The change has been.
Yeah, it's not going down.
Okay.
Yeah.
But increased to account for what happened last.
Well, I don't
year.
know what DEP's motivation or reason for, the increase, what dictates it. But.
Just to give you an idea, I mean, Deer Run is about 2 major streets away from Homestead last year, and we have farmland in front of us that holds a lot of the water. But our home, which is even further back from Willow, we still got water in our basement. So what I have to ask, even though I'm not in a neighborhood that lives near this property, I have to ask, when you're going to have so much impervious coverage, the trees that you're planting, the buffers that you're building, the sink basins, are they going to account for these storms that are really just now regular storms, right? Like this is just happening now.
Well, what I said is that we have regulations that are dictated to us by DEP. And in this case, we haven't just endeavored to barely meet those regulations. We've, endeavored to substantially reduce the peak runoff for those storms that I cited well below what the standard would dictate. So I think, to try to answer your question, that shows a willingness on the side of the applicant and its engineer to do more than just what is required, the bare minimum. And certainly that's with an eye toward, experiencing the type of rainfall events that you are referencing.
Then, with this widening of Homestead Road, which is essentially going to have to be all of Homestead Road to account. I mean, really. The widening of Homestead Road.
Got to do the,
Okay.
You just have to speak up.
directly right into it.
Okay, so the widening of Homestead Road. Now, that's going to impact the trees that you're leaving in place currently, right? If you're going to widen the road, you're going to have to push everything back.
We've got these reports recently. We haven't done a design.
Yeah.
But those specific trees that you're referencing, if they're those evergreens.
Yeah.
We haven't done a design,
Right.
but my impression from having made many site visits and what I described earlier, where the lines would be along the existing, basically connecting the existing catch basins, I think that the answer is no, those evergreens wouldn't be disturbed.
Oh, really?
That the widening is, we're talking about 6-7 feet. Yeah, 5 to 7 feet of additional pavement from the existing edge of pavement. And it's not to add a travel lane, it's more to make a travel lane wider and a wider shoulder.
Okay, so you don't expect that any of the tree plantings in the back, any of the drainage basins, any of this whole site plan is not going to have to shift back further towards the neighborhood that's up there?
No, all the widening would be done within the township right away. The township owns the land
Okay.
where Homestead is. So it wouldn't push everything back.
And the old evergreens would stay in place even with the road being widened?
Correct.
Okay. With regards to the lighting, I know you talked about height. I'm wondering how many light structures you'll be adding, ones that are freestanding and ones that are attached to the building itself?
I don't have a total number. It's all on the plans. And yes, there's pole mounted lights and building mounted lights.
I guess somebody will be testifying to how many lights will be going up.
We can provide a total number. Yes.
And then just to clarify, I thought that in terms of trailer parking, it was going to be there was space for 62 trailers plus 150 trailers, but somebody said that it's now 75 trailers and 62 trailers. Which is it?
I think that the original application, as I stated, had 2 rows of trailer parking here. Now we're down to 1. So that's the change in the numbers.
Okay, so it is 75 and 62? Yes.
Yeah, I was looking for the total. It's on page 5 of Mr. Maskey's report. Correct.
That's everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tom Bassani, 43 Kilmer Drive. Could we just start off with some math? Could you just go to the square footage of these buildings again? You did it in the very beginning. And I'm just curious, if we could start with a little math, the size of these buildings.
Sure. As indicated in my introduction, there's 2 warehouse buildings. One is 368,995 square feet, and the other one is 168,304 square feet. Some of that is office, some of it is warehouse within the structure.
Okay, I just did a quick calculation. That's almost 7 football fields. So I'm sure a lot of folks here have been to Giant Stadium. We're talking about 7 football fields being built here. And I'm only saying that because, and that's the pink, that's not the blue, that's the building.
Do you have a question for Mr. Ford?
Yeah, I do, in just a second. So it's just that it's very hard for people who aren't used to looking at these types of diagrams to understand the scale of what's going on here. I'm just trying to get that out there so people can understand just how big this is. And I'll get to a question in just a second. Here's a question. I don't understand the business of warehousing. So.
Okay, I'm gonna, please keep it because we're down to our last 15 minutes.
So,
And I've
okay.
got 3
Well,
other
we can-
residents, so
We
let's
can go a
just.
little over because you guys did.
No, we're not.
So let me just ask this. There's no tenant yet, but there's a traffic study. So is this type of warehousing a big 18-wheeler dropping something off and another one picking that up? Or is
Once
this like?
again, not an engineering question, please, for
But it's about
expediency.
the traffic, it's about.
You'll get, we have a
what's going on.
they have a traffic engineer that will be testifying, not tonight, but.
So I can't ask anything about
I-
trucking,
Ask him what he talked
Right.
about, that's what you got.
about what he talked
Yeah.
about. So I can't ask about the content of the warehouse?
Nope.
What's going to be in it?
Nope, he doesn't.
Not now.
Wow.
No.
You
Okay.
can eventually.
I
This is-
apologize.
This is
It's all right.
testimony.
The question
about his
him.
testimony.
Okay, then I apologize and we'll meet again.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Don Huff. I live at 33 White Meadow, so I'm on the map. Just some quick questions, and it may have been covered, and I apologize if it has, but, general, envision of how this warehouse will operate, the hours. I know that you have traffic studies that, we'll take a look at as well and ask some more pointed questions. But more specifically, obviously I back up to that property. What type of noise disruption and what type of hours, just generally speaking, do you envision for the project, just so I can
Sir,
understand how that might work? Yeah, I'm sorry. Guys, I know you're shaking your heads. I'm not
No,
used to
no,
doing
look.
these things.
No, I know.
I'm an
You know,
interested
no.
party here, so I apologize.
no,
Everybody's
and
frustrated.
you may
but-
not have been here when Mr. Maskey made his introductory remarks at the start of the hearing, so.
Yeah, you're right, because I raised
Okay.
here from New York City.
All right.
So
I'm
I
not,
wasn't here on time. I
this is not, folks, this is the whole thing. The process that we engage in with this application or any other is that the applicant brings before the board its experts and to place testimony on the record. They place the testimony, the board and its board professionals ask the questions, and at that point, the public is given the right to cross-examine the applicant's professionals based on the testimony they have provided before the board. Without overstating Mr. Ford's testimony, Mr. Ford did not testify on noise, on what was going to go on in the establishment, on the hours of operation. Obviously, all issues that will come up at some point, but not necessarily.
Listen, I apologize.
No, this is not who's right and who's wrong.
Sure.
I'm just indicating to you and everybody else, for most people, the board goes through this twice a month. Most people don't go through this at all. You will have multiple opportunities to ask the questions I think you want to ask about the noise and the operations and the, if there are questions you have of Mr. Ford's testimony as to the landscaping, the engineering, et cetera, have at it.
Obviously, I won't address the noise situation, but you did spend some time on the landscaping, how generally it's going to be undisturbed behind the White Meadow properties. You mentioned something about maybe, between the number of trees and what we read and what it might be. I mean, do you really plan to really help us out there in this project by adding additional trees? I mean, obviously we're going to see the top of your warehouses instead of what we see now, but at least from a noise standpoint, I just want to know a little bit more about the tree situation.
Well, we provided the landscape plan to the extent we can enhance that. I stated we work with the professionals to do that.
Sure.
And I think someone asked earlier whether the applicant would consider placing this, if you look at this area here that's beyond the stream and wetlands and is upland that could be developed for something in a conservation easement? And the answer was yes, they would consider it. So I think to the extent that that answers your question.
All right, well, listen, thank you guys, appreciate your patience, I'll ask the appropriate questions when they come up.
Don't leave the mic just yet.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Ford, correct me if I'm wrong, how many feet above the neighborhood will this proposed project be?
It depends on where you're at.
Well, let's talk about the gentleman who just came up here and
Okay.
asked questions about White Meadow Road.
Don't know that. I would have to review the plan and I can give an answer.
Generally, the proposed buildings are going to be above the neighborhood, are they not?
Yeah,
The surrounding neighborhood?
Yes, well, the entire property has a pretty steep slope along the stream corridor. And yes, generally the neighbors to the east are lying at a lower landscape, lower and below the subject property.
I gave up my engineering degree a while ago, much less possibly my law degree. Can you explain how you're going to provide additional landscaping to buffer the area when these people are already below where the applicant's project is?
Well, it would be for example, the owner's house now. It's right here. Is screened from you.
I'm top middle,
Oh,
so.
I was looking at that screen and I
Okay.
thought you weren't
Oh,
looking
sorry.
at it. I
So
forgot that there's a screen over
I'm top
there.
middle. If you go
I thought
seven
he wasn't
minutes
paying
all the way up
attention.
top, I'm the house all the way on the left there. So I'm just, kind of, we'll talk about the environment when we get there. But just in general, I think I'm just, you testified to the heights and everything else, and we can't really put that together. Just wanted to know what we would do about that.
So it would be blocking the line of sight. That's what we could look at.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, quick question. Would the applicant be willing to provide a visual simulation showing what the view of the buildings would be from the residential streets? So we could give a better determination on the screening? It's not unusual.
Like an elevation.
And provided enough time, we can put it up and the residents can look at it before the night of the hearing?
Yes. Can you? Would you? Will you? Okay, thank you.
You, Mr. Maskey, for the purpose of the record, you indicate briefly to the public, obviously the board, I think, understands what you asked Mr. Ford and Mr.
So
O'Brien.
it would be a simulated look at what the buildings would look like if they were constructed and what the view would be from the residential properties, White Meadow, Winding Way, that kind of thing. All right.
Next.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yeah, you're real close and loud.
Speak loudly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
Speak loudly, it's
okay, all right. My name is Joe O'Connell. I live at 20 White Meadow Road. And this road, by the way, not, what do you call it, lane or drive. Couple of questions. What does a 100-foot buffer include? I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by a buffer. Does that just mean distance, or does that mean actual things planted or a wall built so that it can't be, does it include light pollution? I mean, light and noise mitigation? What does a buffer do?
Right, the township requirement is there is a 100-foot buffer between, along the property lines that coincidental with residential uses or development or zoning districts. And that's a horizontal, it's a width, so that's 100 feet. And in this case, if I look at so that would include this area I'm highlighting now along the stream corridor. And for amount of perspective, the building at this corner is over 200 feet from the property line. So the driveway is about 40 feet off of the edge of the driveway is about 40 feet off the building. So it's, 160 feet of green to that driveway, whereas the 100 feet is what's required.
Okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to prevent like truck pollution, the exhaust, if they leave the trucks running. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to prevent light pollution from infiltrating the neighborhood or noise pollution or anything like that. You're doing nothing erecting nothing to help solve those problems.
I didn't testify regarding the
Well, I didn't know what a
pollution.
buffer would mean. It doesn't mean preventing any of those things. That's my question.
Well, we're precluded from activities in that area, improvements, the
They can't-
driveway, the
They
road.
can't build anything within 100 feet of
Right.
the property line.
They can't.
Build anything. Like the building can't be closer than 100 feet, a driveway can't be closer. It's basically how much a patch of grass needs to be between the property line
Okay,
and to anything that's man-made.
all right. If the road is widened, Homestead Road is widened, and you had talked whether it's just a part of the road or whether it winds up being the whole road that is widened, who winds up responsible for paying for that widening? Who winds up being responsible for future maintenance? In other words, repaving of that road, because truck traffic is notorious for being hard on roads. So does that fall on the people who now own it, or does that fall on the taxpayers of Hillsborough which would reduce the rateable in effect that you're kind of bragging about?
Well, there's no proposal to widen the length of Homestead Road.
Okay, I thought I had heard that was in the thought.
The suggestion from the board engineer was the frontage,
Okay,
couple thousand square feet of frontage.
okay, but even the part that is widened, who winds up paying for that?
It would be within the public right of way. It's the
So the
township.
township, so that would come back to us taxpayers.
All roadways
Oh, that's
all
all
roadways are
I'm
maintained
asking.
within the right of way. Yes.
Just to clarify, though, the applicant would be required to do the actual construction of the widening itself. But then after the road is turned over, it would be turned over to the township, and then they would maintain the whole road after it was accepted.
Okay. And I don't know whether it came from them or you. The discussion was that a lot of the traffic would be going to Route 206 rather than to Willow Road. And everybody is aware that that is a site-restricted hill that, and you've got a lot of new drivers, i.e. coming from the high school, heading home, that traverse that road. So that,
I would just suggest that this would be an appropriate question for Mr. Dean, our traffic engineer.
okay. Okay, the other thing, they were talking about, they dismissed the thought of sidewalks here, from what I understand in the application, because they didn't think it was necessary at all. So that precludes anybody who would possibly be working there, who lives in the neighborhood, from walking to their job, because that road would not be safe for a pedestrian, especially with truck traffic, it's barely wide enough for the truck traffic. So we're precluding, because I'm kind of in favor of the thought of sidewalks being added there. People like to go to the theaters, which is not, that I walk a lot. So going to the theaters, I tend to travel on sidewalks a lot. So, and the next question, you stated that certain areas would be permitted to revert to natural. Okay, would that be required? In other words, yes, you have to let it revert to natural, or is it just permitted? There's a difference? Do you
I
understand?
think that's the intent, is to allow it to go back to a natural state.
But, okay, but it being the intent, does that mean that it would actually happen? Because that would go a long way to mitigating, especially some of this water runoff, which going down and because I'm particularly, and I don't know if this is able to be asked in this forum, with all the water that came down, especially Ida, I mean, Amwell Road was flooded, Willow Road was flooded, I mean, to extents that we've never seen before. And I've got several people who can testify to that, how deep that water was. One person was on the top of his car and barely made it out. So one person didn't make it out.
And I think the testimony was, that we're very sensitive to that. We've been very sensitive to that, to all projects in Hillsborough. And Mr. Ford went through the tabulations that show how we're not just meeting, but greatly exceeding lots that don't currently have stormwater management.
Right, but it's just when you add all these, like this project and then the next project and then the next, it's a cumulative effect, which we already saw unprecedented, I know, flooding.
Well, but that's not accurate. The regulations require that that there's no further impacts that would negatively affect stormwater runoff. So that's kind of one of the main misconceptions that
Okay,
we
because
have
the
here.
environmental report had indicated that this would add an extra, in a bad storm, an extra 1.4 million gallons in addition to what it already does. And I don't know, that seems like a lot to me, especially considering how deep the water went on Clerical Lane and how deep it went on Amwell and Willow Road. An extra 1.4 million gallons. I don't care how many detention basins you build, that's a lot of water.
And that's the purpose of the detention basins, is to capture that water.
Right.
And it's
But
designed
they don't-
in strict conformity with the state and municipal regulations.
Okay, sure, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, I know we've hit the 10:30 mark.
Do you guys want to?
Two more?
I'm
Well-
comfortable with coming back next time.
I mean, I think Mr. Ford's going to be back. So, and I see more people are lining up, so there will be a need, I think, Mr. Ford to be back. And this is where we'll pick up is, questioning with Mr. Ford. So do we need to, I assume we don't have a second night scheduled?
Not yet.
All right. I think we may want to try to maybe pick 2 nights. Because I don't think we're going to get done next time.
The next available night is July 7th. June 2nd, you have an application. June 9th, you have an application. Next empty agenda is July 7th. And we would need an extension on the time of decision to,
And I will indicate to the board, there may be another application coming in July, so we probably do not have a second night in July.
right?
That's whoever races and gets,
Well, if Mr. Grodnick books it in, then they get the other night, but I'm indicating to the board that the second meeting in July is not available for this project.
okay. So probably, then, which night in July? And then you probably should pick the September date because we're closed in August.
Yeah, but July 7th, July 14th, one of those are pretty much spoken for. But then you're off in August, so the next meeting after that would be September 1st.
Can we check availability? Because I'm not available the 7th. I don't know if anybody else is.
Well, there's a meeting anyway, so. There's a meeting anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? I mean, just to be, because it was going to be one of the 2 meetings, so it's just.
Well, the issue is, which one are we gonna have quorum for?
Right.
I'm just saying the 14th or the 7th.
Is there
July
anybody
7th or July 14th? July 14th is, well, okay, July 7th would be a better date in terms of the overall schedule, I think. But that's up to the board.
And you're professionals.
Okay.
Yeah, can the applicant make July 7th? Or July 14th?
No. Now, the 7th worked better for the applicant.
Okay.
And
Do you
before
want-
everybody leaves, we're gonna set this date. There won't be any more notices, so you might want to just hang on for a minute when they set the date.
So you can know.
And do you want to set a September date? Because,
No, because we don't know what the date, we got the time issue, remember, so let's not.
are you sure? Okay. All
So,
right, so now we need to, the time of decision, we need to extend that, but I mean,
yes,
how far do we want to go into
I
that?
would go July 31st. So first of all, are we picking July 7th? Is that what the
Yeah,
board's
they
saying?
picked July 7th.
Okay,
All right,
so a TOD to the end of July,
We'll certainly consent to that, Mr. Massey.
okay.
the end of July, okay.
All right, and what's the time of decision that we're saying?
You're gonna
July
extend it-
31st,
July 31st.
motion, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, to
Quiet.
All right, so can I have a
motion
motion
to continue
to
this
continue
hearing
the hearing to July 7th of this year, with the time of decision being extended to July 31st?
without further notice
Without
at
further-
7:30 or as soon thereafter, the board may hear the application.
So moved.
Second.
Do I need a roll call? All in favor? Aye. All right,
You have a,
Folks, July 7th, 7:30, you will not get a notice like you did for tonight. It is without further notice.
May 26th business meeting, nothing on it.
okay. So, motion to cancel the business meeting of May 26th?
26th.
26th.
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, so business meeting's canceled, so our next meeting is
June
June
2nd.
2nd?
June 2nd.
Another Dr. Denny.
So may I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Another.
Aye, we're adjourned.
June 2nd.